What makes a running shoe fast, right? We have all of this discussion about running shoes being quick, being slow, being for recovery, being for tempo runs, being for races, so on and so forth. There's a shoe for every purpose that you could imagine under the sun, inside and outside of running. Inside the running shoe space, there are fast shoes and there are not fast shoes. Some of those fast shoes might be a plastic plated trainer. Some of them might be a carbon plated trainer. Some of them might not have a plate or stabilizing element whatsoever. But there are shared characteristics of what make a running shoe fast. And today I'm here to break down what I believe are the 5 characteristics that comprise a fast running shoe. Right. It's more holistic than just simply attributes to a shoe. However, these attributes do all add up over their stacking of implementation to the whole product being a faster shoe. So the first one I wanted to address with you all today is grip. Now, grip isn't going to make a shoe fast, but a lack of grip will diminish the speed at which you could run in the shoe. So I brought a series of shoes out here today to talk about all of these different attributes with you all. And so the first difference that I wanted to highlight is between my extremely old pair of Adios Pro 3, which currently now don't have any grip, but at the time when they were brand new, were one of the grippiest shoes in the game. And I can actually confirm that I've been running in the Adios Pro equipment, which is a re-release of the Adios Pro 3 midsole with a lifestyle upper. And the outsole on this shoe when it's brand new is indeed one of the grippiest, or was, I guess you could say, one of the grippiest outsoles in the game. And I wanted to contrast that against the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro 3 Low, which you can see here has a very full coverage, right, outsole, but this has been somewhat slippery for me, and it's not eliminated it from contention as a marathon racing shoe, but that I think does limit its top speed because the grip isn't stellar on that. It's not the same as the Adios Pro 3. So grip, right, comes in all shapes and sizes. Another very grippy shoe that feels slightly different to the grip that's in the Adios Pro 3 is the Metaspeed series in general, but I brought the Metaspeed Edge Paris for reasons that will become clear when we address other attributes of running shoes that make them quick. But the grip in this is, it has this design that allows for the grip to, or the rubber to expand and for the foam to come in contact with the ground as well, which just creates more surface area to grab the ground with. And especially that's important when you're running a race, like a marathon or a half marathon in the shoes. So grip is almost like a prerequisite to speed. It's not speed itself, but it's a vital component of what makes up a fast running shoe. The next 2 attributes that contribute to making a fast running shoe are very close in terms of their influence over the overall performance of a shoe, in my opinion. The first that I'm going to address here is weight. So obviously a lighter shoe is better for running quickly, and that's the case. That's what old school racing flats used to be, a completely stripped away, lightweight version of a daily trainer, right? And you could see the evolution of that in a couple of these shoes, right? So these are all lightweight, and I'm going to actually sort these really quickly for you from lightest to heaviest. These 2 are basically the same exact weight, and they're around 220 grams. The Metaspeed Edge Paris, I think, is like 200. The Douyin PB Pro, this is a shoe out of China. It's 150 grams. It's a phenomenal shoe. It's extremely fast and very, resilient, great foam. And we have in a class of its own, the Streak Fly 2 from Nike. It's like 128 grams, basically a slipper. one of the fastest feeling shoes that I've ever run in. Actually, not one of, it is the fastest shoe that I've ever run in for a number of reasons. And this is going to be sort of the illustrating archetype of what it means to be a fast shoe can be displayed in the Streak Fly 2. So the first thing that we were addressing was grip, right? Obviously, grip on the outsole is very lugged, sort of Nike waffle design style grip. And there's not a lot else to it, right? This is the main landing pad and it has good traction, but that's basically all for grip on the Streak Fly. Where the Streak Fly excels is in its lightness, right? So all of these shoes are fast and they all draw on all of the properties that we're going to discuss today. And each takes its influence, and its cues from one of those peak qualities that makes it so fast. So, and these are just illustrations, mind you. There are other fast shoes that I have downstairs that I didn't bring up here. I think that these just demonstrate the point of this video really well. Okay, so lightness is huge. There's a study a while ago. I don't know the exact statistics on this, but it basically showed that a weight tied around your ankle is multiple times more indicative of fatigue or time to complete a certain distance than if you were to add the same amount of weight to your chest or to your waist, right? So think of it, if you tie like a 5-pound sandbag or weight just around your ankles and picture yourself trying to run in that, and then do the same, but just around your belt, like wear like a hip belt with the same 5-pound weight. One of those two things is going to be way more influential over your performance and fatigue levels. It's just harder to pick up weight when it's on your extremities. Think of it like trying to hold a 5-pound bucket out in front of you for as long as you can, or even a 20-pound bucket. You're going to get fatigued really quickly doing this. Now imagine just doing this with the same amount of weight. It's a very different experience, right? So that's why weight is impactful in running shoes. All of these are within a reasonable range of each other, that they have similar stats, so they're going to feel similarly weight-wise, with the exception of these two. But with the exception of the Streak Fly especially, it feels quite different underfoot and quite fast as a result of it. So weight is extremely significant. So where grip was a prerequisite to speed, like if you think of a car, a Ferrari, picture a Ferrari in your head. Yeah, now picture it with bald tires. Right? The Ferrari itself is still fast, but you can't drive it because you'll crash it. Right? So that's why grip is a prerequisite to speed. Lightness, right? Again, think of your Ferrari or like your, stripped out Carrera 911 race car. Like think of F1 cars. They will go to great lengths to strip grams of weight from their cars to get as much speed out of them as possible while still maintaining the next thing on this list, the geometry to stay stuck to the road. So there's a perfect segue into what I think is almost equally important as the weight, geometry. The geometry of all of these shoes is slightly different, but something that you'll notice throughout all of them is, and we're going to do this one by one, they have a rocker. Right? And the Streak Fly is a really aggressive example of this. So if you look at it right in profile, it almost looks like it's tipped down like this. And that's because it's a sort of a track spike. I mean, it was built on a track spike last. And you could see that you could fling it. You could see that you could fling it. That's what the motion under your feet is going to be as you hit the road. You're going to go vroom, vroom, right? That geometry prescribes how you run, tips you forward, and continues your momentum throughout, right? And we're going to do a little comparison here to some shoes that don't have the same geometry. So the Mizuno Neo Zen, yes, you'll see that there is a bit of a rocker here. It's not perfectly flat to the ground, but it's not like flinging off the table with very similar pressure, right? And the Neo Zen is a slightly rocker shoe, right? It's the Chowdan Win 3TR, not very rockered, still has a little bit of a rocker, right? Most running shoes do. Not many running shoes these days are completely flat to the ground. But because of the geometry, the styling done in this shoe, it propels you in a different way. It makes you feel like you're landing more flat-footed, right? Which is more stable. It feels nice for more relaxed paces, but it doesn't prescribe speed. Okay. So looking at other geometries here, the Douyin PB Pro, you'll see that it's actually almost a flatter shoe throughout the entire shoe, throughout this whole area. But you'll also see that at the very back, there's a beveled heel. And at the very front, there is still a bit of a rocker. And it might not be quite as aggressive as the Streak Fly, but it's still relatively aggressive and leads to, you know, a nice rolling toe off. And this is something that we continue. And maybe the Metaspeed Edge Paris is not the most rockered out of all of these shoes. But it certainly has its own aggressive geometry in another way. So let's take a look at it in profile. Going straight like this, especially from the rear of the shoe, it is extremely narrow. It keeps the platform very, very narrow, and that limits the amount of shoe that comes into contact with the road, right? Limiting your time, your ground contact time, and limiting the amount of foam that needs to be in the shoe in order to get the appropriate amount of stack underfoot, shaving it instead off the sides. Now, obviously, this can contribute to instability. Somewhat ironically, though, I don't find this shoe to be a particularly unstable shoe. Some people do. That's a criticism it's received. But for some runners, the narrow platform on this shoe doesn't really influence the stability as much. And I think it has something to do with the forefoot not being quite as narrow as the heel. The heel, if you're a heel striker, something like this is going to be relatively unstable. And that's a lot of these shoes will draw from the stability pool to sacrifice basically some stability for some speed, right? That's a common thread amongst racing shoes. So this is another way geometry can impact speed that isn't necessarily all about the rocker. They're using geometry here to narrow out the shoe to save weight, right? Which is a huge contributing factor to speed. Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro 3 Low, crazy geometry, not as crazy as the Wave Rebellion Pro 3, but this heel is, you'll see, at an angle like this coming up. And why they're doing that is they're able to add more foam into the midfoot and into the heel without breaking World Athletics rules of the 40 millimeter stack height limitation. For those of you who are somewhat outside of the running space, there's a rule by World Athletics that says that a shoe for road races, typically meaning like 5K through marathon, maybe even road mile, never really thought of that myself, can only be 40 millimeters in the heel. And it's measured from, the problem with the rule is that it's measured from a certain percentage back from the heel. So right here is where they're going to be measuring the heel to see if it's road legal for races. And here, that's not where they're measuring it. So Mizuno felt obligated to shove as much foam in that space as possible to provide, assistiveness, comfort, a more engaging, energetic ride in general. So that's another way geometry can be played with to influence the speed of a shoe. And, cutouts as well. For the Adios Pro 3, there's this really aggressive cutout right here. That's basically all that there's to say about the Adios Pro 3. Also, very late stage rocker in this guy. It feels like you're tipping forward. You land here. It's made sort of to be landed on in the forefoot. And then as soon as you get up onto your toes, you are like rocket shipped forward. So geometry, boom. Next one, and this is sort of a twofer. This is why I didn't make this into a list titled like a list, because these all interplay with each other. And it's not like any one of these characteristics is the truth in all of this. But I did save these two for last for a reason. So the next one I want to talk about is carbon fiber plates and the foam. A lot of people that might be outside of the running shoe space look at a carbon plated racing shoe and they're like, oh yeah, carbon fiber is so fast. Kinda. It's actually not the carbon fiber that is doing the heavy lifting in the speed scenario, but it provides a vital support role in making the shoe able to go quick. And what it's doing is it's stabilizing the foam. So all of these shoes have some sort of plate in them of different natures. These are your traditional carbon fiber plates. They're just carbon fiber plates. The one in the Streak Fly is way more flexible, as you could see from the shoe. But Dowen PB Pro, very not quite as flexible or quite as firm as some of the carbon fiber plates out there, but still very firm and rigid. This might be one of the most rigid shoes that I own, the Metaspeed Edge Paris. And then so these are your traditional carbon fiber plates. The Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro 3 Low is a plastic plate it's a nylon plate with carbon fiber infused into it. I don't know exactly what that means. This is also a really rigid shoe, so I don't think it is actually all that different than if it were simply a carbon fiber plate. And Adios Pro 3 has the carbon energy rods, which you could kind of see poking through there. So why do we wrap the carbon fiber stability element into the foam? The revolution in running shoe technology started with Nike with the Vaporfly, and a lot of the PR around that shoe was because of the carbon fiber plate, but it was because Nike was using this extremely soft compound, PBA or Pebax, right? They were using the foam that was manufactured by Arkema, branded named Pebax, to create their super shoe. And they have their own formula of it. It is a polyether block amide chemical compound, which is basically an oil product that's a plastic that's been foamed, right, through a specific process called the supercritical process. The supercritical process, if you want to learn more, I do have a video on how foams are made, but basically it's a stage of gas, right, either CO2 or nitrous or whatever gas that you're injecting into these shoes that is neither a solid nor a liquid, and then they inject that into the foaming substrate to produce all of these bubbles. When the pressure drops, all of these bubbles sort of disperse into the foam, creating tons and tons of little tiny pockets of air within the foam, like aerating the foam in an extremely aggressive and bubbly way. And all of these different companies, they have totally different ways of doing this, different manufacturing processes. There's proprietary structures of the actual plastic chemicals that go into comprising the foam. But the point of a super foam, right? So there's polyether block amide, there's aliphatic thermoplastic polyurethane, which is the ATPU foam. There's beaded TPU. There's any number of, there's supercritical EVA, which has become better and better over time. There's, I know I'm forgetting something. There's olefins. There's all sorts of different foams that are very energetic. But, there's TPEE, thermoplastic polyester elastomer. And that's what's in the Lightstrike Pro and the Adios Pro 3. They have different, compounds and underfoot feelings. I often describe nice PIBA as feeling like you're running on a hollow door because there's so much empty space in the foam, and it's very springy, like a springy piece of wood would be, right? So that's how I often find myself describing PIBA, how I find myself thinking of an ATPU, which this is a special type of foam. This is an uncompressed ATPU, which is they built the entire block and then cut the foam out from the block rather than molding it to the shape of the last. I got very deep into foam, but that's how important it is to speed. The properties of the foam determine how much energy is coming back into your stride, like how much energy from you hitting the ground is coming back out from the ground into the foam, storing into the foam, and propelling you forward, right? This is the story. The foam is the story. Yes, lightness is critical. Grip, you can't get the speed from the shoe unless you have a stable, grippy platform to run on. Geometry will influence the ride of the shoe. It will influence how aggressive it feels, and it will influence how fast it feels, yes. But the foam, stabilized by the plate, probably is the biggest factor in what makes a running shoe feel fast. That's why when we talk about shoes like the Mega Blast being so impressive is that it doesn't have a plate and it's still incredibly light, and yet it's able to go quickly, right, without sacrificing too much in the way of comfort and usability in a lot of situations. A lot of these shoes that I have in front of me here, especially shoes like the Metaspeed Edge Paris, can feel very jarring to run in because the plate stabilizes it so thoroughly and makes it very rigid. There's not a lot of give in the shoe, so you could hit the ground and feel sort of like a vibrational shock going through your body. In shoes, in any of these shoes, I found it especially true in the Metaspeed Edge Paris. Not so much in the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, the updated version, but yeah, this is a jarring shoe. But these are all fast shoes, and they're returning a ton of energy from the ground at varying percents. Different compounds return energy at varying percents, but they're all returning a ton of energy. And that is the critical component of what it takes to make a running shoe feel fast. So if we look at the archetype of these, like Streakfly 2, probably the fastest shoe, definitely the fastest shoe that I've ever run in, has a lot of these characteristics taken to the highest degree. It is a crazy geometry, has really nice grip, it's lighter than air, it has a supercritical PIBA foam, a carbon fiber plate, and yeah, just the geometry and the fit of it also, the narrow fit of it, feels very svelte and slender and sleek and just fast on foot, right? And same could be said of all of these shoes. They all feel very fast. This is just the logical conclusion of all of the elements that we're discussing today being placed into one shoe. So in summary, grip, geometry, weight, foam, and of course having a plate to stabilize it all and bring it all together. Those are the elements of a fast shoe. I'm sure there are more, like you could look at a lot of these have these serrated laces on them. The running community loves their serrated laces. But anytime you see a shoe with serrated laces, it's probably going to be faster. That's more of a signal that something is for racing. But you don't want during a race your shoes to come untied. That's a sign that a shoe is meant for speed, is if you have the serrated laces on them. Also, tongues of this nature that are just a thin piece of sort of moleskin feeling, maybe feltish kind of, not exactly felt, but that type of material on a tongue also is a signal. As you can see, it's in both of these shoes, right? That's a signal that something's going to be fast. It's actually in 3 of these shoes, same material in the tongue. because it's a way to maintain a padded tongue while also keeping the upper lightweight. Often really fast shoes have floppy heel counters. You could push most of these down really well. In fact, the Metaspeed Edge Paris is one of the firmest heel counters out of this little bunch right here. But those aren't what makes a shoe fast. Those are ways companies will reduce weight, right? And weight is up there with one of the most important factors of making a fast shoe. Yeah. Thank you all so much for watching. That was a lot of fun. It helped clarify some of my thoughts. Hopefully you got something out of this as well. And stay in motion.